Since 2005, we have had 5 new Doctors, obviously not including Joe Martin and John Hurt, and 4 of those Doctors have regenerated inside their respective TARDISes. But for the 13th Doctor's regeneration in the upcoming BBC Centenary special later this year, that looks set to be about to change. So this is something that's been rumoured for quite a long time now. I'm not entirely sure where the rumour originated. And basically today, on the day of recording, it has been pretty much confirmed by the episode's director, Jamie Magnus Stone, who obviously helmed lots of episodes of Series 12 and of Flux as well. He's in an interview basically with the Radio Times in which he talks about his work on Flux and on the Centenary special, which he's also helming. And he basically let slip in that interview that there's going to be something a bit different about this particular regeneration, and sort of implies quite heavily that it's not actually going to take place inside the TARDIS. Specifically, he talks about the 13th Doctor's final scene in her TARDIS and her actual regeneration scene as 2 separate things. So he says, and I quote, "And we shot the last ever scene in the TARDIS and said goodbye to the TARDIS, and then there were some tears. And then we went out to film, basically, her regeneration. And the last shot we did, I think, will be the last shot in the episode as well." So this is super interesting stuff. Lots to get our teeth into here. And particularly for me, it's that phrase he uses there, "and then we went out to film," the word out. Does that mean they went outside just of the TARDIS into a different set within the studio? Or does it mean, did they go out on location? I've seen it suggested by various people that it might take place in a quarry. Don't know what the source is for that, but it's a rumour that's going around. I mean, personally, the way that I'm sort of envisaging it based on what he said there is sort of, I don't know, the Doctor says goodbye to the TARDIS, to her ghost monument, so to speak, and they have a sort of emotional sort of farewell scene there. Then she steps out of the TARDIS for whatever reason, and stumbles and collapses or whatever, falls on the floor. And it's sort of like Planet of the Spiders or Legopolis from the classic era, the 3rd Doctor's and 4th Doctor's regeneration stories, where the Doctor lies on the floor and her face changes or just whatever. Because the way that he's described it as well here, I mean, let's pick up on this as well. This whole idea of the very last shot of the episode, or the last shot that I suppose he filmed at least. I suppose there could be shots filmed by a different director at a different time. But equally, if it is sort of exactly how he describes it here, we could very much just be seeing one side of the regeneration, which again has been rumoured for a very long time, in the sense that we don't actually get to meet the 14th Doctor until a later episode, or until, I don't know, a later announcement, or some other way of doing it, which again would break with precedent set by like pretty much every other regeneration story to date. I mean, alarm bells sort of started to ring for this when they finished filming, I think back in October of last year, and there was that shot of Jodie and Mandip in the TARDIS, and then in the days and weeks after that, it became very clear that the TARDIS had been dismantled, and yet the 14th Doctor, to our knowledge, hadn't been cast by that point. So how are they going to film that handover scene, without the TARDIS and without the Doctor both in the same place at the same time? So that part at least does now make a lot more sense. Based on what we've been told here, the regeneration isn't going to take place inside the TARDIS at all. It's going to take place in a different location. And maybe as well, it's going to be a bit more abstract, a bit less sort of linear and less sort of conventional than previous regeneration scenes where, you see your previous Doctor regenerating into the next one with a face sort of transforming into the next Doctor. Maybe if Jodie is the last thing we see in this story, based on the comments here, we're going to get something similar to Patrick Troughton in the War Games, where the 13th Doctor just, steps out into some sort of abyss or vortex or space and sort of spins around or shrinks away or whatever, but basically disappears away into the ether. Some people have described it basically as like a sort of walking into the sunset ending for this Doctor. I don't think that's quite what we're going to get, but something along those lines where it's a bit more open-ended than a regeneration scene would usually be, where we only get to see the first half of it and then the second half is left, almost like a cliffhanger. That would be a really cool approach to take, and obviously very different from any other regeneration scene we've had in New Who at least, because in the classic era they did shake it up a bit more. Like I said, obviously we had Patrick Troughton in the War Games, that sort of open-ended regeneration scene, the only time that's happened in the show's history. And also just more generally, that idea of the regeneration having to take place inside the TARDIS is very much a New Who thing. You know, in the classic era, what the Third Doctor didn't, or what the Second Doctor obviously as well, the Fourth Doctor didn't, the Sixth Doctor, didn't even get a regeneration scene, and then the Seventh Doctor regenerated inside a hospital morgue. So, you know, it's a lot more varied. It's only the First and Fifth Doctors that actually had that luxury of making it back to the TARDIS for their regeneration. And then, like I say, it's something which, you know, in the new series has become more of a norm. But I would be so up for seeing that precedent, that formula, that pattern broken with the 13th Doctor. You know, do something different. Have something a bit weird, a bit more abstract perhaps. I mean, the possibilities literally are endless with this. One other thing that sprang to mind for me just before we close is they could do a similar sort of thing to Village of the Angels, which of course is an episode that Jamie Magnus Stone actually directed. And obviously, on a separate point, you know, that episode had a big sort of climactic scene for the Doctor at the very end, a sort of transformation scene where it was left a bit open-ended. So, you know, you can sort of see how he may be doing a similar sort of thing here, perhaps. But the point I wanted to make was that obviously in that episode, we had that cliffhanger, then we had the closing titles begin, and then the closing titles were interrupted by the whole thing with Vinda and the guy from the In-Betweeners. So could they do something similar to that, where the episode ends to all intents and purposes, and you get the closing titles, and you sort of, you know, close the book, close the door on this era, and then halfway through the titles, or maybe, you know, straight after the titles, maybe let the closing titles run out as they would usually do, and then in the vein of something like the Dan, John Bishop reveal sort of trailer that aired after Revolution of the Daleks. You know, maybe you could do it like that, where the episode ends, and then you get a little trail afterwards that reveals the new Doctor, or sort of picks up from where the episode left off in some way. I don't know. There are so many possibilities for this. There are so many different things that they could do, you know, that are different to what they have done before in New Who. You know, it's been fairly formulaic so far. It's followed a pretty similar sort of set of rules and a pretty similar pattern. And it would just be really great to shake it up a bit and do something different and make it memorable, you know, make it different from all the others. But what do you make of this news that the 13th Doctor's regeneration is seemingly not going to take place inside the TARDIS, and also might be a bit more open-ended than we've been used to in the past? And yeah, just generally, how do you think the handover from the 13th Doctor to the 14th Doctor should be handled? Should they do something a bit different with it, a bit more abstract? Would that be something that you would like to see? Please do let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on all this stuff, really. Please do like the video if you've enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you are new here. And please also consider supporting me on my brand new Patreon page, where for just £1.50 a month, you can get your name featured at the end of every video that I make. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.